to the cloud. Welcome to the December 16th edition of the free GMAT Prep Hour. I am your host, Reed Arnold. I'm here to give you just kind of a free hour of GMAT instruction. We do these about once every 2 weeks, once a month or so. So keep your eyes peeled for the next one. So welcome. Broadcasting day from New York City. Quick little businessy stuff, some other free prep options. You can step into any of our GMAT classes and take the first session for free just to see if you like it, see if you like the teacher. You can do that live online. You can do that in person if there is a center near you. So take a stab. It's 1/11, or I guess that's bad math, it's 1/9 of our whole course for free. So that's 11% of a course that you don't have to pay for. Why not? We also have all sorts of various resources available to you, books, video courses, online tutoring, in-person tutoring. We have a whole suite available to you. So if there's any questions about that after the session, I'd be happy to answer any. Cool. So today's lesson is something I'm kind of excited about, and something I've been experimenting with my students, because I know that everybody is busy. We're all busy people. A lot of people are working full time, right? That, you know, a lot of people working more than full time, working overtime, no doubt, sometimes weekends. And man, how am I supposed to get hours of GMAT study in when I can't pull out my book at work and start doing questions? That's an understandable concern. And so today I want to talk about how you can study for the GMAT in secret when you are at work or on the train or just someplace where you can't pull out your book. I do want to note that some companies would consider this wage theft, which is illegal, so be careful. But if you're, middle of your day, you have a break, or you just, man, I really want to get some GMAT study in because I want to make sure I'm doing something every day, which is ideally what you should do, with some breaks, of course, but you want to try to put your brain on the GMAT every day. Here are some things you can do, okay? Just some drills. Doesn't take a book, just takes you and your understanding of the concepts and the drills that we do, okay? So let's just get into the first game. I call this the relationship game, all right? And here's what I would like. I would like anybody to name a letter. I'm sorry, not a letter. Name a number for letter A. What do we want A to equal? Don't be too mean, right? Don't pick 1,377. Something reasonable. What is A? Anybody? 3. Okay? A is 3. Cool. All right, and someone else, someone besides Maddie. What is B? Someone tell me what B is. 14. These are pretty mean numbers, but hey, those are the numbers you picked. We're going to go for them. Okay, here's what I want. I want you all to come up with every possible relationship for the values 3 and 14 that you can come up with. Okay, and if the relationship is not nice, and this relationship will not be particularly nice because 3 and 14 are not going to work very nicely together, we might find ourselves wanting to pick new numbers here in a hot second. But if this relationship is not nice, do some estimation if you want. So let me get the ball rolling with this, okay? One relationship you can tell me is that 3 is what percent of 14? And that's not perfect, but give me a nice estimate for what percent 3 is of 14. %5 of 14? Is 3 5% of 14? Good, Isabel. Yeah, it's a little bit more than 20. I'd say, it's about 21 or 22, 23%. Why? Because 3 is 20% of 15, and this is a little bit less. Okay, so this is one relationship you can come up with. 3 is 21% of 14. Here's the challenge. I'm going to give you all 2-3 minutes or so. And again, these numbers are not very nice. We'll probably do this exercise again with nicer numbers, now that you'll know what we're doing. But I want you to come up with as many other relationships between A and B that you can think of. Okay, there are 7 or 8 of them, and you could also you can make fractions if you want. you can turn percents to fractions to double up those relationships. So 3 is about 21%. Well, that's 3 is 3/14 of 14. I know that's obvious, but you'll see when that's useful. Okay, so take 2 minutes or so, and I want you to come up with as many other relationships between these values that you can think of. Okay, here's a little hint for you. I'm going to go to the next slide. Here are all the relationships you can come up with between A and B. And this is assuming we only have A and B. Okay, there's no other things besides A's and B's. Come up with all the relationships here. See if you can. That will be the game. I'll give you one more minute or so. All right, so let's talk. How do we do? Did everyone find a value for each of these relationships? Just out of curiosity. We're able to specify what each of these English sentences is when A is 3 and B is 14. Any thoughts? We had A is approximately 21% of B. That was one of the sentences. We could also say A is 3/14 of B. How about B is a percent of A? What percent of 3 is 14? 46%? Approximately 460, yeah. B is approximately 467% of A. That's what I would say. I could also say B is 14/3 of A. That's a little silly, I know, but it's true. How about this? A is what percent more or less than B? What would that be? Sergey, that would be B is 367% more than A. B is 367% more than A, but A is what percent less than B? Anyone get that one? Well, if A is 20%, a little bit more, is a little bit more than 20% of B, then A is going to be a little bit less than 80% less than B. A is going to be approximately 79% less than B. That's just what that relationship is. Okay, I could say B is 11/3 more than A, or A is, oh man, what would that be? 11/14 less than B. I want to get rid of the A and B there. Okay. Go away. That's fine. The ratio of A to B is 3 to 14. That one was easy here. How about this? A is what percent of the total? If I only have A's and B's, what percent of the total is A? A%? Well, we said A is 3. But A is not 3% of the total. Yeah, it's about 17. Good job, Mike. A is about 17% of the total. It's 3/17. Well, how do I know what 3/17 was as a percent? Well, 3/15 would be 20%. So I figured 3/17 would be a little less than 20%, right? Okay, at the same token, B is approximately 83% of the total. And as a fraction, B is 14/17 of the total. Okay. And so that's the game. That's it. Middle of the day, you pick two numbers and you lay out all of these relationships between the two numbers. Okay. And you want to be fast. You want to build the speed in recognizing them. If you also want a kind of a different version of this game, I'll show that in a second. You can actually, instead of picking the actual numbers for A and B, you can pick any one of these comparisons, any one of these, and get all of the others. So if I start with this, if you tell me that A is, well, you probably wouldn't want to start with about 17%. You want to know the fraction. If you say A is 3/17 the total, you can tell me all of these other values, every single one, assuming there's only A's and B's. Okay, and you want to be really, really fast and clear transmuting from one relative value to the next. Because here's the fun little secret. Every single one of these sentences is identical. When it comes to what it actually tells you, all of these sentences on this screen are the same. And being able to go from one to the other and move from one to the other, that's a lot of the questions on the test are about that. And being able to specify relationships and be clear on the relationships, that's huge. That's a huge part of this test. Okay. So this is, again, just pick two numbers or pick the relationship between two numbers and figure out all the other relationships. All right. And yeah, 3 and 14 were not the best. Honestly, they were nicer than I thought they were going to be. I was worried we were going to get some really heinous stuff, but it wasn't too bad. But pick numbers that are going to be kind of nice together. 20 and 30, until you get good. 25 and 40, 62 and 70. That might not be that nice, actually. But you want to pick numbers that work well. And then eventually you can pick nasty numbers and do a lot of estimation practice. All right. Okay, if we have time, we'll run that exercise again. Maybe we'll pick some more common numbers. But that's it. And I know this seems maybe silly, but this is a huge thing. People who are good at the test can do this exercise quickly. Okay. Here's a second version, very similar version of this game. And I'm going to be a little more picky about the numbers we choose here because I want it to be somewhat nice. Someone give me a value for A. Any value for A. But again, you might not want to pick something like 67 because that's prime. What would be a nice number? Okay, 20. I like 20. Okay. Now, someone pick a percentage. Ideally one that's going to be somewhat convenient with 20, so probably not like 11%. What would be a good percentage? 25, good, okay. 60 would have been fine as well, Jessica. Okay, so now we have 20, an actual value of 20, and a percent of 25. And here's the game this time. Come up with as many sentences with these values in them, okay, that the GMAT could give you. So one of them, the most obvious one, is that 25% of A is 4. Nope, 5. I can do math. I'm a math teacher. I know things. 1/4 of 20 is 5. 25% of A is 5. Okay, so come up with as many other percent relationships as you can. Take about 2 minutes here. Okay, here's a hint. Here are all the different ways that GMAT can give you a relationship with these percentages, or with numbers like this. So take another minute, fill in the ones you didn't get. Okay, so I filled those in. I filled those in while you were working under the presumption that you were also filling them in. With the base of 20 and a percentage of 25, These are the relationships I can come up with. The most easy one is, of course, 25% of the number is 5. 25% of 20 is 5. Which of these did you find surprisingly complicated, or maybe you didn't think of at all? Or what were some of your responses to this game? The last one is insane. What do you mean, Sergey? What? Okay, the last one is insane. Did you get it, or are you looking at it now like, what the heck? How does that work? You didn't get that one either? Okay. Yeah, typically, most people really don't like these last two. Most people don't like these last two. I would say those are the hardest. And of course, the GMAT's going to use them a lot. They like those games. Okay. I think also there's something surprising. I might be wrong, but I would be surprised if I were studying for the GMAT again at how many ways there are to use the same percent and the same number and have totally different relationships, 20 and 25%. And I can do 6 different things with that. Similarly, in the game we played before, back up, and I know that's going to look kind of weird because the stuff moves with me. Back on this game, I actually use a bunch of different percentages. All the percentages were different, but they actually expressed the same relationship. So that's weird. Okay, so these are all different percentages, same relationship. These are all the same percent, totally different relationships. And I mean, the reason I stress this game is because, oh man, do I see so many people come do word problems with percents and just mix up the relationship that the problem gives you. Because of course they do. There are 6 different relationships that sound very similar. Or there's 14 different ways to say the same relationship. You do this, again, middle of your day, you just run it on a worksheet, on a little pad by your computer. You just get really fast at noticing the subtle differences between these relationships and being able to figure out all these different relationships. So how did we get this? Let's talk about this last one, since that was the one that tricked us most. How do you get this last one? 25% less than this number. How do you figure that out? What's the setup for that? I want everyone to think about that for a second. Break down the denominator. What do you mean by that, Tommy? Or Timothy? Excuse me, Timothy. Good. Okay, so 25% is 4 parts. Great. So I have 25% less than. Yeah. So that's one of the 4 parts less than. As a fraction, that is 3/4. Right? This is this is the math equivalent of 25% less than. 25% less than. Well, then here's the problem. We don't know less than what. That's what we're trying to figure out. 25% less than something, some number, is 20. This is our A value. 25% less than what we don't know is A. That's how you solve that. How about this one, this second to last one, 25% more than 16? How do you get 16? Those of you that got it or didn't get it, I want to think about this. Well, 25% more than, that means there's 5 parts of 4 parts. Yeah, good, Nina. 25% more is 5/4. Jessica, 125 over 100 simplifies down to 5/4. Great. 125% of 25% more. Those are equivalent statements. Okay, 5/4 x is 20. Good. And then we break that down and it gives us 16. Great. Okay. So again, 2 games just to really, really, really build your deep understanding of stuff that you know how to do, stuff that you've done before, but you run it a lot and these different relationships start to feel more familiar and feel more automatic. And same with the previous game. The different ways to talk about the same relationship starts to feel automatic. All right. Any questions you have for those first 2 games? Anything I can help you with? If you want to, you know, go back, rewatch this video and write down the relationships. So you have like a, you know, I've had students who like print out little worksheets where, you know, they have the top A and B and then they have all the relationships. So they just keep it in their pack and pull out a sheet every now and then and write down 2 numbers and fill out the sheet. And then they throw it away. And then they pull out another one, they write down 2 numbers, they fill out the sheet. Okay. If there are no questions, let's move to the next game I have. Set building and set tinkering. So a lot of the word problems in statistics are going to be about possible sets of numbers. Okay, like you'll be told that there's, you know, 7 cakes and they each have different amounts of calories. That's a silly example. Or there's one in the book that's famous. It's like 7 pieces of rope, famous in GMAT world. That's the world we live in, where GMAT problems become famous. But it's a great question about the possible sets that can be built with different lengths of rope when they give us certain constraints. Okay, and so what I want you to do is I want you to just middle of your day, just set some constraints for yourself and try to build a set of numbers that follows those constraints. And then you can tinker with the set just to get, again, an intuitive feel for how sets of numbers work. Sets of numbers work. So here's what I want. I want someone to tell me the average of our set. What is the average of the set we're going to build? $18. Okay. The average of the set is 18. Cool. Someone give me the median of the set. What's the median of my set going to be? Median is going to be 20. Sergio's throwing out 101, which is cruel. Sergio, well, I like the game. Let's work up to that, where the average is 20 and the median is 101. We'll get there, but let's go easy first. So the mean is 18, the median is 20. Let's start with something simple. How many numbers do we have in this set? I'm just, Jessica, I'm just asking, we're going to be building a set that has these properties, right? I haven't given you any numbers. It's just a game to get used to how to build sets under constraints. So how many numbers in the set? And for a long while, and pretty much every time on the test, you want this to be less than 10. They almost never make you do sets bigger than that, but if eventually you get good at it, you can. Okay, sure, Maddie, let's start with 3. We'll start with 3. Okay, so here's what I want. I want everyone to build a set that has 3 numbers. The average is 18, the median is 20. Ready? Take a minute or so, go. All right. Anyone have a set that they would like to share? 14, 20, and 20? Sure, okay. So I could have 14, 20, and 20. That's a set. I could have 12, 20, and 22. 12, 20, and 22. I could have 2, 20, and 32. Good. The key things are that I have to have a median of 20. That means the middle number has got to be 20. Okay. And my set has to add to 54. That means it's an average of 18. That's the rule. So then what you do once you have a set is you can tinker with it just for fun. As fun as this can be. It'll get you better at the GMAT though. You think, okay, well, what if my maximum value, or what if I'm trying to maximize my maximum value? I want to make this number as big as possible. And let's assume that every number has to be a positive integer because that's what most of these sets need to be. So I want this number to be as big as possible. So everyone think about that. What will that set be if I maximize that last set? Good, it'll be 33. Yeah, I have to keep 20 in the middle. This last one can't go smaller than 1, so I go to 33. Okay, here's a different question. What if I want to maximize the minimum value? Sergi, I'm saying it can't go smaller than 1. Eventually, if you wanna take out that restraint, go for it. I mean, you'd have infinite possibilities, which will be a little uninteresting. But most of the time on the GMAT, these questions are dealing with amounts of things that can be counted. And so you're going to be dealing only with positive numbers. So Jessica says, okay, let's make the minimum 19 because we're trying to make the smallest one as big as possible. So let's do 19 and 20. Okay, well, but then what's the third one going to be? Yeah, third one's going to be 15 now, which that doesn't make sense. Yeah, we've broken the rule. We've broken the set. We have the same average, but now 19 is actually the median because 15 goes on the other side there. So this actually, we can't make 19 be the smallest, the biggest of the smallest. That's not going to work. So keep fighting. What is that maximum? I don't know what it is, by the way. I'm not doing it. You all got to figure this one out for me. 14? That seems right. Yeah, 14, 20, and 20. Because I can't. Good, Nina. Nina, did you do something to realize that? I think there's a good practice there. I can't make this big one, the biggest one. It can't be smaller than the median, right? It can't be smaller than the median. Oh, that works, Nina. Yeah, this one actually already did that. I hadn't made that connection. But this biggest number can't be smaller than the middle number. So we make it the same. Okay, and then that would leave 14 for that. So 14 is the biggest possible value of the smallest value. Now, if we introduce a new constraint, what if they have to be different? They have to be different numbers. Well, then I can't use 20, I'd have to use 21. And that would make the maximum not 14, but 13. Okay, and so you just, and I know this is not the most fun thing you have done in your life. I understand that, but hi, you're studying for the GMAT. That's the choice that you've made. And it's, you know, something to do in the middle of the workday where you can just write it on a piece of paper and you just get really comfortable with thinking about sets of numbers because a lot of questions ask about sets of numbers and you want to be pretty easy. Like, okay, I can build a set. I can tinker with the set and know what happens if I change this number, what happens to these numbers, and if I change the average, what happens to everything. And if I add another number to it, but I have to keep the same median, you know, let's play that game because why not? I just mentioned it. So let's take a look at this set. Let's look at this set right here since we haven't 2, 20, and 32. And let's say we have to add a fourth number to it. We now, instead of 3 numbers, we have 4 numbers. Okay, but the average stays the same and the median stays the same. Well, how would that set change? Take a minute and see if you can think about a 4-number set. And just for fun, one other thing. Let's say that 32 has to stick around. 32 has to be one of the numbers. Anyone noticing anything? I might be wrong. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants on this exercise as well. That's the point of the exercise. I'm having a hard time following the rule. I think this is impossible. And that'll happen. If I have to keep 32 around, okay, and I have to have a median of 20. Well, if I have a median of 20, I need these two to average at 20. Well, one nice way to do that is to make them both 20. Sure. But 32 has to be around, so I'm going to put it here. We have a problem, especially if the numbers have to be positive. Because in order for the average to be 18, the sum has to be 72. And I'm already there. I already did it. And so I'd have to put 0 here. I have to break that rule, perhaps. So it turns out that this one isn't possible under the constraints we made. Does that mean we wasted our time? No, because the point is not really to do a problem. The point is to get fluid with the set building thinking that needs to be done. And when you make these kind of logical realizations like, the set I'm trying to make is impossible because of this reason, great, that's fine. Okay, I was a total accident. I didn't mean to make an impossible set, forgive me. It was total accident, not how I planned on it going. But the thought that is required to realize it's impossible is the exact same practice you need to be doing. Okay, so you just pick some constraints, build some sets. Any questions about this one? About this exercise? Okay. You'll realize also the more you do it that, you know, certain constraints fit better together. It's easier to pick, you know, mean and median versus, I don't know, if they you know they're consecutive numbers and well, if you know consecutive and median, you know the mean. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore, but you'll get a sense. Basically, what I'm just saying is you'll get a sense of set building, and that's really what the whole purpose is anyway. Okay, cool. Let's talk about another drill we can do. Prime factor deconstruction. Okay, I'm actually going to fly through this one, not because I think it's a bad game, it's just because it run out of time and there are other games I want to spend more time on. This is just a game and making sure you know how to prime factorize something. Okay, so you pick a number, you pull out the prime factors, and you realize how those prime factors fit together. So if I pick a number like, I don't know, let's say it's totally random, 440. Okay, well, 440, that's 44 times 10. That's 11 times 4, which is 11 times 2 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 2 is 4. So if I prime factorize 440, I end up with 2 cubed times 5 times 11. That's the prime factorization of 440. And now I just want to think about what that tells me about the number. Okay, what are some other factors of 440? Well, I know 8 is, because there's a 2 cubed. I know 55 is, because we have 5 times 11. I know 44 is, because I have 4 times 11. And I also had it up here, of course. But when I have 2 2s here, and then 11, I have 44. I know that 88 is, I have 8 times 11. Maybe wouldn't have thought that. Like, if you asked me, is 440 divisible by 88? I would have said, I have no idea. Don't make me do that. But if I break it down to the prime factors, it's pretty easy to see, yep, it's divisible by 88. It's divisible by, let's see, 110. That's nice, 55 times 2. So you just get the prime factors out and see how those prime factors recombine to figure out what the other factors are of a number, just to get really comfortable with how prime factors work. That's all that is. Simple game, easy to do. We just pick a number and prime factorize. This one is more fun. So here's what I want. X and Y are integers, okay? And what we have here is we have something times X, and something times Y is an integer. And I want you to pick the numbers. What is the coefficient for X? Someone, any number. The coefficient for X. 8. Good choice. So 8x, and what is the coefficient for Y? 61. Sergey, you're very mean. Sure, 61. Sergey will make us deal with kind of gross numbers. Okay, here's what I want to do now. All right, I want you, if this thing is an integer, that's true. The good point, Sergey, the GMAT is not nice. If this is true, if 8x over 61y is an integer, I want you to think about what has to be true about x and y. This is to deepen your understanding of divisibility and also its relationship to prime factors. All right, so take a minute or two and think about how this game could work. How can 8x over 60y be an integer? What has to be true? All right, friends. Okay, so here's the thing about 8x over 61y. There's no simplification to be done. If there was, if I picked, let's say, 8 and 64, I could have simplified first, and I should simplify first. Turn that into 1 over 8. 8 and 61 don't simplify. 61 is actually prime. Okay, but if 8x over 61y must be an integer, can anyone tell me what we know has to be true? So Sam, you're very close. One of the things you said is definitely true. Okay, one of the things you have said is definitely true. X is definitely a multiple of 61. Okay, and all the factors of 61, but 61 is the only factor of 61, so that's a little dull. But X is definitely a multiple of 61. Now, does Y have to be a multiple of 8? That's kind of one of the questions here. And it actually doesn't have to be a multiple of 8. For all I know, Y could be 1, right? And I could just have 8x over 61, right? Y could be 3. Y doesn't need to be a prime factor of 8, actually. Yeah, because Y could be 3. I could have 8x over 61 times 3. And okay, great. Well, x is a multiple of 61. What else must what else must x be a multiple of in this particular fraction down here if y is 3? Yeah, x must also be a multiple of 3. Okay. What if y is 6? 8x over 61 times 6. That's a little bit different. What does x have to be a multiple of there? Still 61. Does x have to be a multiple of 6? Actually, no, it doesn't. It doesn't, because this 8 simplifies to a 4, and the 6 simplifies to a 3, and so this is still the case where x just has to be a multiple of 3 again. This actually is no different, okay? Because the one of the 2's, the 2 of the y is already taken care of by the 8. So I actually don't need x to be a multiple of that 2. The 8 already has taken care of it. That 6 and that 8 cancel out. So here's what has to be true in the situation, okay? X has to, in the original situation, x has to be a multiple of 61. That has to be possible. And x is also a multiple of any factors of y except 8. The 8's already taken care of. If y is a multiple of 8, no worries. We already got that. We got that from the 8 up top. But if there's another 2, if it's 16, if y is 16, that's interesting. Because if I have 8x over 61 times 16, well, that 8's going to take care of a lot of that, but there's still a 2 left over. And so the x has got to pick up that 2. So here we know that x is a multiple of 2 and 61. Okay? That just has to be true. And so you, again, you pick numbers and you just realize what it means about divisibility. This will deepen your understanding of divisibility, which is a huge, huge part of the test. And it's complicated and nuanced and subtle. It's easy to say that y has to be a multiple of 8, but it actually doesn't quite. You have to think about what could y be? What would that do to the situation? What would that mean about x? Sam, I think trying multiple numbers will be how you start this game. I think that will be the first way you get good at this game, is you just plug in different numbers and see what happens. And eventually you'll realize that certain numbers work better than other numbers, meaning some numbers actually work and some numbers don't. And you'll realize the numbers that work do something nice. They cancel something out, right? They make the situation work. And that will deepen your understanding of the divisibility relationships that the GMAT loves to test. And you'll start to realize why certain numbers do what they do. Again, Sam, the whole purpose of this is just to be tinkering at your desk. Instead of doodling, whatever you doodle, you just doodle some GMAT stuff. Just put your brain in GMAT topics. Okay? So just pick a coefficient for x, pick a coefficient for y, figure out what that tells you about the divisibility. Go through the different possibilities about the divisibility. Okay? You're doing good GMAT work in that case. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. So far, all that we've talked about is quant. These quant games, these relationship games, the prime factor games, the set building game. But there's also work you can do in verbal when you're at your desk. And this one is about sentence correction. And it's a really, really useful thing to do. You can do this middle of your day. You read an email. Your boss sends you an email from work or about work. And it's a long, lengthy paragraph. And man, you got to read that. That's important. And so you're reading it and you're like, here's what I can do. I can make it look like I'm really paying attention to what my boss is telling me. But actually what I'm doing is getting better at sentence correction, because that's all I'm thinking about, actually, is the grammar and the structure of the sentences that my boss has written. Everyone else thinks you're just reading the email and being a good employee, but you're not. You're a bad employee who's trying to go to business school. I won't tell anyone. So when you're reading an email, start looking for the things that sentence correction tests. And it might help to pick up our books or do some reading online if you're new to the GMAT. But figure out what the GMAT tests and how, and then start just practicing it in day-to-day emails. Look for the core of a sentence. Okay? Look for every instance of parallel structure that is used in the paragraphs. Find any pronouns in the paragraphs, especially the ones that the GMAT tests most frequently. We call them the 5 deadly ones. It, its, they, them, and their. Just notice whenever those pronouns pop up and see if they're, find the antecedent, see if they're used correctly. We use them incorrectly all the time in day-to-day speech. But do they, are those pronouns really replacing nouns that they should. Find any comparisons. See if the comparison is actually logical in the way that the GMAT demands. Are there any modifiers? What words describe what other words? Is that a correct modification? You can just think about these sentences in the way that you think about GMAT sentences. Okay, so what I've done is I have pulled an email that I wrote my fellow teachers when I was looking for other questions to do, because we teach the same questions a lot in the classes, and it gets, you go a little crazy when you teach the same thing over and over again. So I was reaching out to them asking like, hey, what other questions do you all teach? And so I wrote this email, okay? And there are some things that, you could use this email for practice in GMAT sentence correction work. Here's what I want. I want you to take this email, and I want you to find just two things for now. I want you to find the core of each sentence, and I want you to find parallel structure, any parallel structures in this situation. All right, take, this will be a little bit longer, take 3 minutes or so. All right, so let me show you what I mean by the core of a sentence. The core of a sentence, I probably should have specified that a little bit better, but there's just not time to go through all the stuff in the GMAT. But the core of the sentence is like the main structure. Like, what is the structure of the sentence? Okay. And this email was not perfect for this because the sentence structure I use is not particularly sophisticated. This was a pretty casual email. I'm sure the work the emails you get will often be a little bit more, I'm sure, official, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is just one I found quickly and was innocuous enough and let you into our world as teachers and the things that we think about, which I'm sure is just riveting. So on the left here, I'm showing you what the email was, and on the right, I'm trying to show you what I found on the core. I'm having a hard time kind of phrasing this right, but I'm on the hunt for new questions to teach. Well, the core of that sentence, like the structure, the basic structure, just I'm on the hunt. That's the subject verb. That's the condensed down structure of that sentence. All the other stuff is fluff, just for the sake of variety and sanity. That's all fluff. That's details. For the core, for the main structure, I just want subjects, verbs, objects, like necessary stuff, okay? I found a few, but would love your advice. Okay, it would be great. I don't like, it would be great. Blah, 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 blah. That's all crud on the GMAT. If I'm checking just structure for the core, I just want to make sure the subjects, verbs, and the basic core of the sentence is built well. So it would be great. I've started to teach this question, right? I don't like this question. I don't even need to think about what this question is. That's not the point. I'm just reading for the structure, okay? It's a question about crud, whatever. It's a question. Okay, so that's what I mean by find the core. You're just reading the sentences for structure and for the subjects, verbs, how it's built. Okay. For parallelism, for parallel structure, we can take a look at that thing again. Let me pull up here. Okay. If we want to, now we're just, okay, so now we're not finding just the core structure, we're finding all the instances of parallel structure. Well, just for the sake of, here's parallel structure, variety and sanity. Okay, and when I find parallel structure, I want to find every part of parallel structure. That means the marker, the elements, the root phrase. If you don't know what those are, read up on parallelism. Those are the 3 parts of all parallel structure, and you want to be able to identify them quickly. And this is a good way to do that. And is the marker, variety, and sanity are the elements, and for the sake of would be the root phrase. For the sake of variety, for the sake of sanity. Okay, I have found a few myself, but would love. Okay, there's a parallelism marker. Would love, have found are the elements. The root phrase is I have found, I would love. That's parallel structure. Okay, and I actually make a parallel structure mistake in this test, in this email. Something that the GMAT would actually flag me for and be like, that is not grammatically correct. That is a mistake. Did anyone find the parallelism error in this sentence or in this paragraph? It occurs right here. Okay, it's a question about. That's the root phrase. It's a question about. Well, then I branch into 3 things. It's a question about organization. That's a noun. It's a question about testing cases. Now I'm a little worried. And it's a question about applying constraints. Well, the rule of parallelism is that the parts that are parallel have to be the same type of word. This is a noun. These are both ing words. I made a parallelism mistake. Now, no one would care in the real world, but again, we've all decided to spend our time with the GMAT, so we have to care about things that no one else cares about, including perfect parallel structure. Okay, and if you can find them in casual everyday speech, you're going to be much more likely to find them on the GMAT. Okay, so you just run through the different sentence correction topics and read the email for the core. Okay, I found the core of every sentence. Now I'm going to read the email and find every instance of parallelism. Okay, oh look, there's a mistake. Now I'm going to read and find every pronoun. Now I'm going to read and find, like, here's a pronoun, it. Well, what is it? CR 655, the question that I'm talking about. That's the pronoun relationship. And you just want to be really fast at seeing them and specifying the relationships at the GMAT test. That's it. That's all it's for. Okay. Any questions about this one? So again, something I promise you can do this in the middle of your day. Now you obviously have to have studied up on the topics first to have a sense of what they are, right? If you don't know what the core of a sentence is, you can't do this exercise. So read up on what the core of a sentence is. But once you do it, practice it. Middle of your day. You can do it for 3 hours a day. Nobody knows. You're at work. You get really good at finding the core. Really good at finding parallel structure. These are objective things that the test, you realize there's a mistake and you just get rid of it. That cuts time and effort and thought, makes it automatic. The last exercise that I was going to recommend, and we don't have time to do it, I'm afraid, is critical reasoning. Okay, critical reasoning is one of my favorite parts of the test, and it's also something that I think is most useful in day-to-day life, because you could do it all the time. You are bombarded with arguments. I don't know if you knew this, but times are politically contentious. So there are all kinds of arguments in the newspaper all the time. And you can start treating it like critical reasoning. You can find the premise, you can find the conclusion, you can lay out what someone believes and why they believe it, and pick it apart like it's a GMAT argument. Doesn't matter what the argument is. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, I don't care. Pick it apart. What are the assumptions? Where are the flaws? What is the author assuming? I found an example. It took me 30 seconds in the New York Times to find an example. And I was careful. I didn't choose one that is politically noxious at all for anybody. If I was allowing myself that, I could have done it in 10 seconds. But I found someone made an argument about teaching kids empathy. This paragraph was in the letters to the New York Times, and it's basically a GMAT argument. It's got a premise, a conclusion. You could pick it apart. You could execute and practice critical reasoning on it. So just take a second, read that, and kind of, we don't have time to do it, but get a sense of what I mean. Like, why is that a GMAT argument? Here's what this argument would look like if it were on the GMAT, if I were to deconstruct it in the way that we suggest deconstructing arguments. The conclusion is that fiction can foster empathy in young children. How? Well, we're going to develop questions about character motivations, and we're going to examine the protagonist's actions and speech. And doing that will foster empathy in young children. And we are critical reasoners, and we're going to be like, will it? I don't know, maybe. What about this? What if children don't care? They don't want to read. What if the questions about character motivations are totally off base? Or, there's all kinds of things you could be critical of in this argument, but that's what you can practice. Deconstructing arguments and being critical of them on their own terms. They're everywhere. Everywhere you can do this. You can practice the GMAT for 6 hours a day at work if you let yourself. Now, your work won't like it, but that's not up to me. That's up to you. That's not my job. Don't get fired for this. But I know it's easy to be overwhelmed, and it's easy to not feel like you have any time to do GMAT work, but there are many, many exercises, these are a few of them, that you can do in the middle of your day to deepen your understanding and habits and processes and rules at the GMAT test frequently. All right? Any questions at all about any of these exercises that we did, or anything else? You have to do them. That's the thing. You have to do them. You can't just hear about them and not do them. You have to practice. And it's very easy to not do it. I get it. But I just can't stress how useful it would be if you were finding the core of every sentence twice a day. You just take an email and you find the core. That'll build your understanding of sentence structure so well. You pick those relationships, you run them. That'll deepen your understanding of relationships so well. Right? If you do these exercises, you will get better at many, many aspects of the test without even using the OG or practice tests. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording here, and I'll answer questions that are coming in the chat box for those of you that are sticking around. For those of you online that are watching this later, welcome to the future. I'm sure it's just fantastic. I'll catch up with you there soon. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Happy holidays. See you in the new year.